My name is Mihai Patru and I'm with Caravanserai Project. And thank you all for joining us today. And hope all of you are healthy, staying home, doing the right thing. This session, as you have already read in our call, is about survival strategies for social impact organizations, especially in the context of the current crisis. Um, while there is an abundance of resources on the health front, the discussion about what social impact organizations, both for-profit and non-profit, should do and could do in this context is rather limited. As I mentioned earlier, our goal for the next hour and 10, 15 minutes is to discuss the options and that these organizations have in order to cope for the moment with the current crisis, but also to make sure that once this crisis is over, these agencies will continue to exist and increase their impact. For starters, I would just like to introduce Stephen Bennett and Jeremy Hobbs, who will help us navigate this challenging period and talk to us about their experience and how they see the solutions for this crisis. Just a few ideas about housekeeping. If you have questions, please send them, type them in the chat box. This session is recorded, so at the end, we will share it with everyone. Also, if you have other questions, I will send you an email after we finish the conversation with our email so we can engage privately. Going back to Jeremy and Stephen. Stephen is also a co-founder of Caravanserai Project and a member of the Kali Endowment and the Arcus Foundation. And Jeremy Hobbs is the president of Western Wind Foundation and a board member of the Inland Empire Community Foundation. Initially, this conversation was planned to address mainly issues in Southern California, Inland Empire, but we noticed looking at the registration list that we have a national and global audience from Europe, Mexico, Canada, and all over the United States. So in some cases, some examples you might find that they focus exactly on the US, but hopefully there is something to learn there, and maybe the governments in your own countries will have similar approaches and you will be able to use some of the ideas and tips we will be sharing today. So I'll pass the Zoom microphone to Stephen Bennett so he can start his intervention.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with something a little different than we had planned. Last night, as some of you know, the Senate unanimously passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as the CARES Act. It will go to the House on today, and they're kind of finishing up some of the writing. And tomorrow it is expected that the House will pass the bill and be signed immediately by the president. One of our board members, Rhett Wilson, is in Washington and has been working with advocates and lobbying for the not-for-profit sector and has provided us with a briefing early this morning. And I wanted to share just a couple of things from it that I would like Jeremy to address a little later about how to make these work for you. But the bill has two pieces to it. One is some relief for not-for-profit organizations and also some benefits for donors. It takes some restrictions off donors. You can actually take a larger amount of deduction for donations without itemizing some things that have been very important to us for a long time. However, there's three programs specifically that are clear so far, and they're loan programs. One is an emergency small business loan, which we've known about for a while, but they're adjusting it and adding not-for-profit to it. and also the economic injury disaster loans. Now, we've known about these for about a week, and actually people have started to apply for them. However, based on some other information that we received this morning from one of the SBA lenders, they said that they're hearing very high rejection rates initially for the SBA disaster program. Those are the first two loans, which is not surprising. And there's kind of a consensus that they're going to have to change the application process. Part of what's most interesting about the second one, it's a loan for not-for-profits of budgets under $10 million that is a 2% loan. You can use it for anything, and it's not about your collateral, which is quite remarkable. So if we can make it work, it'd be great. And I know that Caravanserai and Jeremy have been working on figuring out how we can get support for getting those loans. The third one, though, is to me one of the most amazing ones, and it's called the, what do they call it? The Payroll Protection Program, or the PPP. But it's basically a loan that pays for your employees for 4 months, March, April, May, and June, if you can show certain criteria. They got to be paid under 100,000, and it will loan you the money to pay their paychecks, just their salaries, nothing else. And at the end of 4 months, if they're still employed, the loan is forgiven. Think about it a moment. That is huge, huge, huge. It's also available to small businesses. So that's the payroll. I want to say it again because I want all of us to get this right. It's the Paycheck Protection Program, okay? And right now it looks like it's going to be delivered by what they call SBA 7A lenders. We heard yesterday and saw in another memo that they also may be using community banks, but we don't have anything more on that. So this is stuff we've received over the last 3 hours. There's a document that we got from the National Council of Not-for-Profits that spell this out, and we will mail it to everybody who's registered for this conference here in a few minutes as soon as this conference is over. Okay? So now we're going to talk about survival. And I know it's kind of a tough conversation, and hopefully there are some really good resources circulating out there. And we've seen a lot of them that are coming out. Academy Go does one with the community. IECC does one daily. The Community Foundation is sponsoring stuff like this. There's tons of data, and it's very hard for you to sort through all of it. I think there's 4 or 5 webinars in this region today on these issues, but they're mainly resource issues. And we want to talk to you practically about running your business and trying to keep it alive. And I want to start with one big topic, and that is liquidity, cash. Right now, you need to be looking for cash, all the cash you can find. Where have you hidden it away? Under the mattress, in your bank accounts? Do you have receivables that are due? Do you have money anywhere? You need to know how much money you can get your hands on easily and quickly. Cash is king. And by the way, this is for all of you as individuals, any business you might own, but also for not-for-profits. You need to be identifying and gathering up all your cash as fast as you can and knowing exactly where it is. You're going to need as much cash available to you as possible. These government programs sound great. I noticed this morning that a local pool of funding here in the Inland Empire announced the grant proposal system this morning. So money may start flowing fast. I'm just afraid a lot of us have payroll and rent due, and we're going to need cash sooner than later. So gather your cash, okay? And that's like my #1 headline today. But I want to turn it over to Jeremy Hobbs, who will talk to you about some of the very next steps that we think everybody ought to be doing. Jeremy? Are you on mute? Do we have him on mute?
There, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be on this call with you this morning. I'm Jeremy Hobbs, president of the Western Wind Foundation. I wanted to follow up with what Stephen said. He kind of started out this course with the dessert, and the dessert is this rather amazing package of incentives and payments that are going to be coming from the federal government over the next few months. It's still a very complicated bill. It's got something like 1,200 pages. It's not fully vetted yet by the House. It hasn't been signed by the president. We think it's going to look a lot like it does now, and there are so many provisions in there that will be helpful to everybody on this call. But I think that we still want to focus on some really important details of how we get your organizations and our organizations from where we are now to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. And so what Stephen started with was the topic, I think, of today, which is get liquid. And that really requires a deep dive. And for those of you who are in the nonprofit world, most of you have come into this world with a sense of how important different causes and programs you work with are. That's what really your passion has been. But I think this is a unique time. It is an opportunity to really do a deep dive on the financial side of your organization. And so that's what we're going to try to walk through a bit here. And the reason is that even with a massive infusion of cash, there's still a danger out there that your organization will not be able to exist as we go forward. So what we're trying to do is give you some tools right now to help you get the financial side of your organization in order so that you're ready to actually thrive when this money comes in. So the first thing we want to talk with is we really want to look at revenues. And as Stephen said, find whatever cash you have available. Where is it? Is it in a bank account? Is it with a community foundation? Do you have endowed funds? It's just a really important step to know exactly how much cash you have on hand right now and where it is and how you can access it if you need to. You also need to be looking at what the current receivables are. How much is owed to you? Who owes it to you? And how likely is it that you're going to get it on a timely basis? Because we know one thing that happens for businesses and nonprofits is in a time of economic uncertainty, there's always slow pay. So you really want to give some real deep consideration to how likely is it that that check that you were expecting is going to come in. Your donors are probably very much like the rest of us. We don't really know what to do, so we're not doing much of anything. We're trying to figure out where we should be spending our money and perhaps where we're going to reallocating our money. And that's a real concern. So you want a realistic assessment of the cash you have and the receivables that you have coming in. You also want to look at what assets you have, because assets, sometimes not-for-profits don't think about them as being a potential source of cash. So you want to identify if you have any assets that have a value or that could possibly be borrowed against if you need it. You know, if you have a building that's completely unleveraged, it's worth looking at your assets. And that's kind of looking at your asset side and getting a clear picture of that. Then the most difficult thing to do, and the thing you really got to look at carefully, we all do, is how much do we owe to other people? And how much do we owe in what's our ongoing operating expenses? What's our payroll, including all the benefits that will be paid? What are our fixed monthly expenses? Our rent, the lease payments, the utilities, anything else that you're paying for on a day-to-day basis, your contractors. You've got to know and understand exactly how much money is going out in your organization. And when you have those two, and we're going to go into a little more detail on that a little later, but when you have those clear picture of that, what you can do is create a cash flow model. And what that is you're just going to be looking on almost a week-by-week basis to seeing money that you have on hand, money coming in versus dollars going out. And you need to look at this as being the best case. You know, what if everyone meets their obligations and you don't have any extraordinary expenses? A middle case, which is what you think is going to be most realistic. And you also have to look at that worst case, because we always have to be planning for what could be the worst. You don't hope for it, but you have to plan for it. And what that's going to allow you to do, and it's not that hard to do. You can even do it on a QuickBooks or Excel. It's not that complex. But what it's going to allow you to do is understand how long can you stay in operation given the current circumstances, and what do you need to do to reduce your expenses and to assure that whatever revenues you have coming in can come in, because that's going to guide your strategy. So you may make some decisions about payroll, you may make some decisions about programming based on understanding what those costs that you're incurring currently are. And this is also, I want to make this a point. This is not going to be a one-time exercise for a well-run organization. Someone is going to be updating this on a regular basis. I would suggest at this point in this crisis, we're looking at it almost on a weekly basis, if not more often. Things are changing very quickly. As these programs roll out from the federal government, that will change your income. It will also affect your outflow, because you're going to have to meet certain requirements to meet with and participate with these programs. So I think this is a really important exercise to get used to doing over the long haul. And this is something where, we all want to look to well past this crisis to a future time. This kind of activity will actually ensure that your organization has got some real ability to succeed. The other thing it will do is, as you're going through the applications, which will come up, whether it's run through the SBA or through a community bank or any other lender, or most likely some of the more serious funders who have created loan pools and are also looking at emergency grants, this kind of information is key to them. The first thing a banker will do is think about what your assets and liabilities are, what your cash flow is, because nobody is going to want to invest in an organization, no matter how worthy, that is not going to survive, right? They're throwing money away. Neither a bank nor a government is going to want to do that. And so we really want to give you the tools to say, okay, we've now got this cash flow model put together and we're ready to move forward with our lenders. So this is something that even in a time of crisis, we urge everyone to participate in and get clear. It's just a great exercise to really learn your business. Stephen, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you. You're going to speak next. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I wanted to, thank you, Jeremy. I wanted to also make clear that as I'm looking at who's online, there's a number of you who we know are not-for-profits who have budgets in excess of $10 million. There is a special loan program for you under the Industry Stabilization Fund that you are eligible for. The loan doesn't get forgiven, but they can stretch it out for 30 years. They can't charge more than 2%, and let's see, and it doesn't accrue interest or require repayments in the first 6 months. So if you borrow it for operations and you're back in business and running in 6 months, you can pay it off and it won't cost you anything. So I just want to let you know, because I see a number of you online that are in that category. Most of us here aren't, but there are some. Okay, so then, so these steps to survival. When you're looking around at your finances and worried about your revenue streams and worried about your grants, there's a number of tricks. First of all, one of the best advice I got from one of you recently was you need to really focus on the 3 or 4 things you need to be doing to survive, and push back those things that you're doing that you do not need to be doing to survive. So the list might have, okay, we want to still provide some vital services that may be really core on like a Maslow's Hierarchy of needs. You need to be able to continue to maybe process payroll. Who's going to sign checks? And this is in view that we're all working all over the place, and most of us from home. How are you managing internal controls? How are you going to create a communication message and make sure it's under control? And who has the right to send it out? And how do you go through checks and balances on that? But you need to get your best and brightest in a Zoom room together and determine your practical and plausible actions to focus on these 3, 4, 5 things that you have to do to survive. Do not get distracted and forget some of these very basics. You need to cut your expenses to the core. And most not-for-profits, we feel like we do that all the time and don't carry much fat in the first place. But this is a little different. And one of the big questions you've got to ask yourself, can you survive this? And if you can, will it require you to shutter your operations until things get stabilized again? Or are there programs or activities that you need to suspend or shutter part of your operations or scale back? The sooner you make these decisions, the sooner you're going to quit spending money and save revenue. In some cases, we'll talk about this more in a second, but in some cases, it may be redeployment of employees, particularly if we can get these loans that pay for our employees for 4 months. You need to get this really done, but you need to also do it with a framework that you can restart in 60 or 90 days. So you don't want to mothball something that you can't reopen. So you need to be very thoughtful about how you shutter. And we're trying to develop a protocol on shuttering programs temporarily because there's a lot of things you need to think about in that process. One of the biggest issues for all of us is care for our employees. They're our real asset, and these are human beings. And I wanted to mention in this CARES Act, there will be direct payments of $1,200 or less and $500 per child, up to $3,400 for a family of 4, to be sent out in weeks. The amount will be in phases based on earnings between $75,000 and $99,000, and different numbers for couples. But a lot of America, a lot of our employees are going to get this money. There's also expanded unemployment insurance, where they're going to be including gig workers, freelancers, and they're going to increase the unemployment insurance $600 a week for 4 months. That's pretty significant. They're also going to pay additional money to employers for paid leave mandates for people who have to take care of their children or take care of family members who are sick. And we need to use these plans. You need a plan for your employees. You need to figure out how you're going to either repurpose them or furlough them, or how you're going to use them during this period. In California, the Employment Development Department has a program so that if you reduce your employees' time to 60%, they're still eligible for all benefits, and the unemployment insurance will make up the difference. Wow. Secondly, we're seeing organizations starting to stagger or give flex time to families so that parents can take turns taking care of their kids and work a different set of hours. And also in California, the EDD is offering an immediate qualification for unemployment, and you don't have to be searching for a job if it's temporary, and the employer can testify to that. So those are all tools, and I think there's going to be a lot more. So, but you need to have a plan, and you need to keep your eyes open on these resources because they can really be good. So Jeremy talked about building this analysis so you know your situation and where you are. But one of the things that is so commonly used in the for-profit world and it is negotiating and renegotiating. A deal's not a deal until it's not a deal anymore, is a mantra in the private sector. Not so nice, but reality. We're suggesting that if you're in trouble, one of the first things you do is contact your landlord and find out if you can get a rent deferral or a rent reduction. And particularly if you're shuttering a program on a particular site, they don't want to lose tenants, and everybody understand what's going on. You need to let your bank know what's happening. As things go forward, you may need to strengthen your relationship with the bank, and the best way to do that is having a trust relationship with you. Most of you probably don't talk to your bank, but getting on the phone and talking to the guy who handles your bank account and tell him or her the truth will serve you very well in the long run. Let your vendors, people you regularly pay, what your situation is and what your capacity to pay that may be reduced and slower. Vendors will often tolerate you calling them up and say, look, I owe you $2,000. I can't pay you now, but I'm going to pay you $400 a month for the next 4 months. Or I'll pay you $100 this month and $400 next month. And so many vendors will do that if you communicate with them. If you don't, and you simply don't pay it, that creates all kinds of trouble. So ask for reductions on payables and service, consulting, professional services. Don't be shy, and negotiate with your vendors. Also, don't be afraid to ask a vendor for a donation right in the middle of this. You owe money on some kind of supply that you need. Call them up and say, I need a donation. They've made money on you for a long time, understanding that they're under crisis as well, but don't be afraid to ask. You can't lose. The other thing is, if some of you may operate with grants and program grants, matter of fact, probably most of you do on this phone call, definitely reach out to your grant program manager. Share with them your situation. They're all looking for money for us. But also, there's a movement going on in the United States right now among our philanthropies that are looking at options like taking a program grant and reclassifying it as general operating, which is huge. If it's on a payment plan where you're getting payments every quarter or something on a grant, some of them are willing to speed up payments. And if they move your program grant to a general operating grant, they reduce the reporting requirements significantly, and that can take a huge burden off of us. And to have operating grants right now, is huge. The last thing on negotiating is contact your key donors and tell them the truth. Ask for their guidance and support. Don't call them up and just ask them for money. But make sure you have your homework done in advance, the kind of stuff that Jeremy was talking about. We did this seminar to a closed group with IECC and First Five last week, and then we had a meeting, I think, on Thursday with Michelle Decker and Karthik at the Community Foundation and UCR. And one of the people online heard this, and the next day, and we had been giving her money, she calls me up the next day and asks us for my guidance and support and tell me how broke they were. And I thought, well, she was listening. I give her so much credit. And the last thing I want to say to you is you need to stay up to date. And we get all of this information coming into us, and it just seems like it's bombarding us. But there's going to be stuff on coping tools, on mental health issues, on dealing with the virus itself. But also look for these things about funding and mechanisms to defer payments, to gather cash, and to take advantage of the programs that are out there. So you want to watch for reports from the federal program, and we'll send this one out. We got this morning to all of you on this call. You also want to look at Small Business Administration here in the United States, and also watch your Labor Department or Unemployment Department, see what they have to offer. And the other thing is just stay connected and learn from others, but you've got to scan the environment and watch for yourselves. So I'm going to turn this back to Jeremy, who is going to talk more about some of the key financial issues you need to be dealing with. Jeremy?
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And I want to kind of punctuate a few of the things that Stephen said and do a little deeper dive into some of the things I talked about. Again, this is kind of probably an overwhelming time for almost everybody. And for people who are running not-for-profits that are used to providing services, especially to people who are disadvantaged, it is a very difficult time because many people don't know what to do. And I think Stephen mentioned this, the notion that we're all kind of, we can get into a panic, and this is not a time to panic. This actually is a time to very much stay focused. And it is a time to really focus on what we can do with our organizations today and tomorrow that will allow them to survive next week without knowing exactly the contours of what federal or state or foundation support will be for us. So again, I'm out here in the Coachella Valley, and I have to probably have a few people out here who are on the call. You know, the Coachella Valley is maybe, I don't want to say it's going to be the worst affected by this virus, but it will be at the top of the list, because our whole tourism, most of our economy is based on tourism, and we were at the very height of our tourist time, and that's just been wiped out. That's not going to recover quickly. It's not like a manufacturing business that if this shuts down for 6 weeks, they can get back up and running and they have a little blip. In the Coachella Valley, we're going to have some long-term effects on this. And we also have very vulnerable populations in terms of age and infirmities and poverty. So it's really a very difficult place to be doing this. But I think what we all need to be focused on is, what can we do today and tomorrow? And so again, I'm going to reiterate this: paring down your costs. And this is not, this is such an exercise that I'm going to suggest that you go all the way down to the tightest detail. If you have a line item on your Excel or on your QuickBooks that says marketing, understand what each item underneath that is. Who are you paying for what? Maybe there's something, an ad you've been running somewhere and it's been running and running. Well, that's the time. Now's the time to say, wait a minute, I don't need to spend money on that ad. And one thing, just as a little trick, things that are already in your recurrent automatic pay, really look for those. You may have forgotten that you're doing it. They're automatically drawing out of your bank account every month, and it's not right now an essential core element of what you're trying to do. So part of this exercise is learning so much more about your organization and where you are spending the money. And I know this personally, I know it in every business I've ever been in, we're always surprised by some of the things we're spending money on that we've been spending money on for a long time. So I think it's really a drill down exercise, and it will keep you focused. And what it will also do is let you learn a lot more about your operation. And I think on the revenue side, Stephen has put it very nicely. You've really got to distill down what the core of your operation is. We all want to expand what the services we provide to people. We all believe in what the value of our nonprofits do for individuals and for society. There's no question about that. But we will not be serving those goals if we're not in existence. The bottom line here is survival is the most important thing you can do for your organization right now. And whether you need to temporarily suspend operations, because effectively there's no way for you to do what you do. An example might be an after-school program in person, right? Very little chance that that's going to happen unless you can transition to an online setting, and that may be more effort than it's worth. But right now, what you can do is figure out how to protect your organization, protect your core assets, and shut down for a little while still looking at what kind of resources might be available. But if you're operating, what you want to be doing is focusing on the operating things that will bring in some revenue and that will be able to survive. So anything that's a pay for service, anything that's getting federal and state contracts, you want to put your focus there. The non-revenue generating ones, no matter how important they are to you, you really need to start thinking about, how do I cut them down? You can't just start thinking, you need to be shutting them down until we have a clearer picture. And I think that's really important. It is survival. Without survival, there's nothing to talk about, right? If we have to shutter next week, nothing to talk about the good that you've been doing for whatever time you've been operating. And I know many of the organizations are on this call. I know the outstanding work you do. As we move forward, the bill that Stephen outlined at the very beginning does have some wonderful provisions in it once they start to roll out. The notion that the organizations can get a loan for your payroll costs, covering up to 4 months of payroll, which would put us through June 30, with a provision to forgive. That's what's being talked about right now. That could be an enormous way that you're protecting your employees and protecting the organization. That will take processing by either the SBA or the banks. It's not going to be easy. I can tell you that I've been involved in several loan applications that have been put forward to the SBA under these emergency loans, and they are being overwhelmingly rejected. So I think that will loosen up, but the better your application is, the better financial information, the better control you have on it, the more likely the SBA, the lender, the funder will be able to say, hey, this organization knows what they're doing. I'm willing to put money forward because I think they're going to continue to exist and they're going to spend that money well. And be prepared. And I think on the other thing that's very important about these is understand what the requirements are before you take the money. Understand that to convert this loan, this potential loan into a grant or have it forgiven, there are certain requirements you're going to have to meet. Know those requirements. On the revenue side, besides just covering expenses, I think we're going to see some really strong provisions in this bill that should help you in the mid to long term. By the way, I look at things in short term, mid term, long term. You decide which one, how the timing you want to look at it. Right now, I look at short term as being 1 to 2 weeks, midterm being 2 weeks to about 6 weeks, and believe it or not, long term is now over 6 weeks. That's my view of how I'm looking at it. You need to look at it for your own organizations. But in the middle to long term, the stimulus bill will provide some benefits to you in going out to donors. The provision Stephen mentioned, also there's another provision where the limitation on deductions, it was limited at
Yeah, I think there is a problem with his connection. Do you want to pick up on his idea?
Okay. You were talking about. Are you having trouble with your connections? No. Okay, everybody's good. So I'll just keep going here for a few minutes. And Jeremy, you can rejoin us and see if you can get back on. But he was talking about some of the benefits that are coming up and how to look at this long term. And I think one of the real issues around this is about how we position ourselves for the future. And we look at our plans short, mid, and long term so that we don't do damage to ourselves that we can't recover from. Jeremy, I see you're back on. Are you able to communicate?
Sorry about that glitch.
There you go.
So as I said, I think what Stephen just jumped in and covered was you're going to see some opportunities for fundraising and donor support coming forward. You've got to get through this. And I think the most important thing right now is to very much stay informed. There are all sorts of interesting provisions. By the way, there's also a provision of $750 million for early childhood education, which is a big concern out here in the Riverside and San Bernardino counties. So there's going to be a lot of different programs that are tailor-made to certain areas within the nonprofit world. So besides spending a lot of time focused on your own financial statements, your own financial acumen in this, also be looking outside to collect any information you can. You may be able to apply for a lot of different funding opportunities going out in a few months that you weren't able to apply for before, as they sort of specialize. There's a lot in this bill, 10,000 or 1,000 pages or more, that it's going to take a while to parse through. Just be out there looking at what is there, listening to other people. And I just wanted to wrap this up with following up with what Stephen was communicating about is communications. Talking to your vendors, negotiating with your vendors, talking to your bankers. Simple, clear messaging. Everyone in your organization should have that simple, clear messaging. Don't make it complex. Make it as simple as you can. Reach out to your supporters by email, on your website, or phone calls. It's also a really good time to activate, to really use the board members you have who are your strongest board members. The ones who are knowledgeable, particularly about finances, the ones who have relationships with banks, the ones who have relationships with businesses, the ones who can introduce you to other people, or the ones who are just really good at listening to the concerns you have and improving your own planning going ahead. Really use your board at this point. And again, reaching out to your staff, your volunteers, and your clients. And you know, sometimes we're all being deluged by these messages about what to do in the COVID crisis. Sometimes just an outreach that's a simple asking how they're doing, explain what your organization is doing, showing some hope for the future, but saying this is where we are now, focused on where we are today. And I'm going to wrap this section up by saying, I think the other thing we should all be focused on, it's in our nature and in our hearts, is what can we be doing for others and other organizations? And I think that's a really important way to think about the way you're moving forward. You can ask for help from a variety of people, but you're also very intelligent people, very experienced and caring people. Always being open up to say, what can I do to help you? Do I have a talent or a skill that I can bring to help you as we all work through this complicated set of circumstances? I think then, Stephen, I'll turn it back to you if you're ready.
Okay, great. So we've got a few questions that I want to answer. And if, can you pull them up, Mihai? One of them was, what are those benefits to donors? Hector Sanchez had a question about the deductions that donors can take. And I'm going to just see if I can find that so I'm telling it correctly. Okay, charitable giving incentives include a new above-the-line, universal, or non-itemized deduction that applies to all taxpayers for total charitable contributions up to $300. It can be applies to contributions in 2020. They also lift the cap on annual contributions for those who itemize, raising it from 60% of adjusted gross income to 100%. For corporations, the bill raises the annual limit from 10% to 25%. Food donations from corporations would be available to 25%, up from its 15% cap. Sorry to read that, but the question was specific and I wanted to answer it best I can. Let's see. Credit card companies. Does this bill cover this issue? I don't know. I don't know, Dr. Lisa. I know that the loans would allow you to pay off credit cards. I know that. Right. Okay. Deborah Bracas on the issue about freelance workers. AB 5 makes most freelance illegal. Can we still apply under the new CARE Act? It looks like it. Based on what it said, the wording said I think it actually said freelance. So that's a curious one, isn't it? Yeah. Vicki, ideally, they're going to be telling us, well, the president has to sign it. So from a legal issue, I think it is when Trump signs it, it becomes effective. How fast they can roll it out, they claim they're going to have checks in the mail within 2 weeks. Okay, fabulous. Rabia, what was the name of the loan? There were 3 loan programs, and one of them is called the Emergency Small Business Loans. The second one is called Economic Injury Disaster Loans. And the other one is called the Paycheck Protection Program.
Right.
Okay. And Angelica, hi. Oh, thanks. Okay, thank you. Most are being denied for low credit scores. Right. I bet that's right. Then I think that's it. If anybody has any other questions, let us know, and I'll turn it over to Mihai, and good to see all you guys.
Yeah. So what I think we have about 15, 20 minutes. What I was thinking of talking about was Marie Kondo. And, everyone is staying home, binge watching, different shows. One of the shows that I've been watching was Marie Kondo and her tips about tidying up and cleaning your closet. Well, I think, despite of the anxiety and all the problems that this crisis has been creating, I think there is a real opportunity there to take a step back and fix all the issues that our organizations have been facing and those issues that have challenged our work. So whether you call it the Marie Kondo method or spring cleaning, it's all about commitment, analysis, and obviously implementation at the end. Uh, Maybe this is the time when we all kind of take a step back and reconsider our theory of change. Look at the competitive analysis, better understand the landscape, the communities that we are serving, look at the beneficiary profile and the experience that we are providing. Usually these things are, we deal with them when we establish our organizations or when we develop a strategic plan. But that happens maybe once, twice, uh, since the organization has been created. So maybe during this time, we will reconsider everything we do and try to fix the issues that have made our work very hard. Uh, Probably start with the question of where we see ourselves, our work, our organization in 5, 10, 15 years. And that's a trick that we have learned from Jason Tester at the Institute for the Future. And then look back and see, what is it that we can fix? What are the strategies that, new strategies, innovative strategies that we could implement in order to get where we want. Um, Both Jeremy and Stephen have been talking about some decisions that might not be well received or might make our board's staff uncomfortable. But I think there is never a good time to take these decisions. And maybe during this crisis, and maybe this is the time that we will turn into our advantage. These results might be uncomfortable. Some organizations might not survive. If that's the case, why not look at establishing different partnerships? And there are many organizations that are looking at the same beneficiaries, providing similar services. Why not work together and use all our resources to continue our work? And just think about these problems as opportunities in drag, and whether this crisis will continue for the next 3 weeks, 2 months. It will conclude at one point, and that's when, regardless of all the financial help that we might receive now, that will stop eventually at one point as well. And why not use this period to reconsider everything we do? And once this is over, make sure that our organization not only survive, but they will improve and increase their impact. Stephen, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I do. Please, if you have any more questions, we've got a few more minutes to answer them, but I did want to just say that we would really invite you to keep in touch with us. We will try to keep in touch with you a bit without bothering you too much, but you can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. Mihai is preparing an article on the future, thinking about how we can take this as a time to reorganize and really maybe restructure quite a bit of what we do and some kind of future thinking, which will be published in the next few weeks. We'll also be publishing a series of videos on sustainability, on impact of the future, leadership for the future, and how to be transformative and get out of the rut we're in about all of being so transactional in our work. So, stay in touch with us about that, but those videos will start coming out next week on YouTube and be reachable through our other access points. Also, we're very interested and have been talking to some key leaders in our area about how to create a kind of a virtual hotline for people in trouble who just need some guidance and individual thinking through. And we're trying to figure out if that's viable and how that might work. We're also trying to figure out if we can identify some folks that would be able to help you get these loans, help you fill out the applications, help tell you how it works, and get it done. We think there's going to be a huge crush. The loan documents on the first two loans that we talked about is not particularly easy. A lot of this has to do with just terrible credit. But so how do we do this best? Now, let's see. There's some additional questions here. Is the Paycheck Protection Program only for budgets under 10? Yes, I think so. The Paycheck Protection is for only under 10 million, but we will check. And I think that it's based on prior budgets, which may not be fair, but it may be true anyway. And Deborah, you asked about it. Is there any consultations for applying for these loans? We're sure trying to identify some for you, and we may have. I was on line with somebody this morning who runs a SBA 7A lending organization that can do that work. And I asked him right before we got online if they could take referrals and help them through the whole process, or do we need somebody here that can get people ready and to apply for their loans? So that's a good question, and we're trying to figure out. Okay. Vicki, that's some of these programs are for small businesses, and they've included nonprofits. So no, there's a bunch of programs for profits as well. So that's good. Janet, oh good, thank you, Janet. Council on Not-for-Profits Trends, great. So look at Janet sent us all the Council on Not-for-Profits analysis. That's very good. The loan max is 10 million. Jeffrey Wands, the loan max is $10 million. If you're 10 million or lower, your loan max is 10 million, not 100,000, which I think is also kind of amazing. Can you message the name of all the different types of loan? Yes, we will. Thank you. What's the name of the special loan program for not-for-profits with budgets over 10 million? Okay, I read those, but we'll send them all to you. Are there any zero loans for not-for-profit, Dr. Lisa? Not that I know of. So in a sense they are, because Lisa, because the idea is they loan you the money, and if you do it, they say that they forgive the loan. But that's the only ones I've seen like that, Dr. Lisa, are for employees, and this loan program to pay your employees for 4 months. If they're still employed at the end of it, they will forgive the loan. So that's the only one that would be not for a zero loan. And the other example would be some of the other loans that give you 6 months no interest, 6 months no payment, so that if you only borrowed it for 6 months, it would be a zero loan. Okay. Okay, before there was a glitch. Okay, yep, no. Any other comments? Is there a site we can see the new rules? There should be. I'm going to send you, we're going to send you this copy, which will lay it out. Okay, this is very interesting and very helpful. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good. Bradley Boyer from Epilepsy. We have such a mix of people. It's just fantastic. But Bradley's wanting you to know if you can get a sense about who's on the call. PR from the endowment. I did not mention PRI from the endowment, Joseph. There are loans through the PRI program. That's a loan program through the California Endowment. The trick there is you got to bring a deal to them. You can't just go ask them for money. You've got to take them a deal that's all packaged and ready. And but we've expanded it significantly. Jeremy, do you want to add anything?
I did want to add in that one of the other things that's happening besides these loans, which is where everyone is focused, there's also many billions of dollars, like in the hundreds of billions of dollars being released in federal spending for a lot of different organizations. They're outside of these federal dollars. So you also want to be looking at those. There's about 30 billion going into health issues. There's another 20 or 30 million going into I'm talking billions here, into children issues. There are a whole bunch of different places where we're going to see more grant and federal dollars coming through in addition to these loans. So that's something to constantly be looking at, is how do you get your organization eligible to get some of that funding as well. And I think a little bit of it's outlined in the document that Stephen is going to send out to everybody. But don't forget that there's, as I said, there's such a multitude of these. You want to really be looking at the whole world of where you can get these dollars.
Mm-hmm. So I had a question about what is a PRI, by the way. And so, like with the California Endowment is a good model. You have your loan, your grants. You have direct charitable activities where you actually pay directly to have charitable work done that are not grants. And then you have PRIs, which is a loan fund, where it's PRI stands for Program Related Investments. Okay. And so the endowment has about a $200 million loan fund. We've mainly been underwriting things like healthy grocery stores and real estate development and that kind of thing. On the other hand, you've got to have a deal packaged to go to them. And then we actually, and a lot of us have MRIs, which are where we actually invest our funds and own equities, just like we do in the stock market, but they're program related, mission related investments, MRIs. Okay. Have any special rules, considerations, opportunity emerged for organizations for fiscally sponsored 501c3? That's interesting. Not that I know of, but because we're your fiscal sponsor, Nick, I think it's a great question. So we should check that out. But maybe, let's look for it. Okay, and is there anything specific for housing providers? Yes, I believe there are, but I don't know them for housing providers. Okay, so we're just about at the end. We've had a lot of great questions. Hopefully we've answered a lot of them. If there's something special that we haven't answered, please let us know. And we'll try to get back to you on the best information we have at the moment. Okay, so thanks everybody. Thanks, Jeremy. Great to see everybody, the people we can see. We love kitties in the pictures. And take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.